Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about solving problems. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, as a software engineer, when you start working on a problem that other teams in your organization are trying to solve for their respective applications, would you interact with them to understand the patterns that they are using? Yes, very much so. So it's pretty important for every software developer to understand that regardless of what your background is, whenever you join a company, you have to understand that most of the companies are already doing things in a certain way. And your best bet is usually always to try to fit in first and do what I like to call inventory. Inventory basically means that you take stock of all the code, all the systems, who is who, like what people are you dealing with, and so forth. Kind of get the lay of the land before you make any suggestions of changes and improvements and stuff like that. The reason being simply that if you start shooting off your mouth about this or that and so forth, you're going to piss a bunch of people off. And often you're going to just take longer and annoy a lot of people to figure out the same things that you could if you just kind of played it cool and learned how things worked first. Because once you know how they work, then you can make more informed suggestions. You know, it's sort of like making, like, it's a more of a surgical approach to suggestions versus just spraying every idea you have, right? And when you do that, you will find very quickly that a lot of the stuff that you're doing, if now this seems to be like a bigger company or some multi-team type of situation, if you need to do things that crosses to different teams, such as, let's say, you're working with microservices or something like that, and you have some teams that have some of the APIs that you're dealing with, etc., etc., well, then it's really important for you guys to align on how to do things. You have to collaborate, because otherwise it's going to take a lot longer to get anything done, especially if you have a dependency to another team's code base. And so by approaching the problem in this fashion where you collaborate and kind of talk through how they are doing things, you very quickly start to get one part is that you build social rapport with people, which is very good. Another thing is that you're organically creating a situation, and this takes a bit of bravery, but it is the healthiest thing that you can do. You are, in a sense, putting yourself a little bit out there, saying that, hey, we're doing this, and I would like to have some feedback on the thing we're doing, and just to see how you guys are doing it, and see if there are any ideas that you have that are useful. What that does is that it very organically facilitates a situation where people feel like they can share their ideas and provide feedback in a non-threatening way. Because what you're openly saying by just reaching out to people, trying to understand how they solve the problem and then see if you can align accordingly, is that you're not saying that you are incompetent. You're saying that I have a few ideas on how to solve this problem, and I see that you are solving the same problem in a certain way. Maybe we can compare notes, or maybe I can look at how you are doing it and see if I can align more with the thing that you are doing. You know, what is it, like imitation is the highest form of, imitating someone is the highest compliment or something like that? It's that sort of conversation you're having, and that is actually very, very useful, because this is something that I fight with on a nearly daily basis and have for a long time. The problem with having a distributed system and having the current ecosystem of working in software companies is that you have an almost unnecessary level of personal freedom and autonomy on each team. What do I mean by that? Well, basically what I'm saying is not that freedom is bad, I'm saying that chaos is bad. It is bad for teams to have so much independence that they can do whatever they want, because what happens is that you lose quality control. And that is very, very, very bad, because although you might want to manage your company as like a autonomous team type of dynamic where each team can do their own choices, etc., etc., the end result is affecting the entire application. And that is something that very few people understand. Everybody hates the monolith because it's, from the management perspective and the project perspective, a bad solution. When it gets really, really big, it becomes very tricky to move around in the code and work independently. So what do? Well, we optimize for autonomy, which is, a lot of people use microservices or SOA of some flavor in order to do that. But what you just lost is the consistency in the experience of the monolith, because the monolith usually is just one big architecture of like a already pre-made stack and processes, etc., etc., which means that you actually now lose something that is in a sense more valuable, which is the consistency of the experience for the customer. I like to say that every good software distributed system should be McDonald's. Or a fast food restaurant, basically. So the end goal for you is to align all the teams that work on all of these services within reason. I mean, not every single team is going to be able to sit on exactly the same stack, and that's not the point. But you need to get to a point where the experience of moving between teams or the end system has the same consistency as a fast food restaurant, where you might have different suppliers of like your resource, like your ingredients for if you're making hamburgers, for example, but the taste and the restaurant and the experience for the user, all of that stuff, or the customer in this case, is the same. You could go to a McDonald's or a Burger King, or doesn't matter which one, and the goal is to have the exact same experience. And this is what you should strive for. It is a meta version of the idea that you probably heard, that code should be written so that it seems like one person wrote the whole thing. This is the next level. All your services, all the different patterns that people are using in different applications across your distributed network of systems, or like your microservices infrastructure, etc., should be written in such a way that they perform at a basically the same level, and the teams themselves should also have playbooks and ways of working so that kind of mirror the rest of the organization, because the goal is not to have one team that is super performant, better than everybody else, and then everybody else sucks around them, because the end result will actually be worse. Because if this is what I want people to start doing. Think of your team dynamic and all your microservices, so forth, as a network. And what is the one thing that every network has to have? Well, good transfer of information. Your mobile network or whatever network you have is pointless if there's like one node that is super effective, but everything else is broken, because the end signal is not going to get to where it needs to go because of that inefficiency. And that is the biggest challenge in my point of view, at the very least in this situation, to get the entire ecosystem of applications to a level where they're all performing at roughly the same sort of level. And you do that by doing what I call doing the house thing. Dr. House, there's a show that's called Dr. House, where usually what he does is that he's an expert. He goes into his room of doctors and he starts just shooting his mouth off. He starts saying that I'm thinking this, I'm thinking that, etc., etc. He starts a dialogue by just stating obviously to everybody what he's thinking, and then they provide feedback, and that brings the whole conversation out to light, right? And more people need to do that, and that's what I suggest that you do. Exactly this thing. You simply say, I'm thinking this, I think I'm going to use this system, or I'm going to use that solution, I'm going to try it this way, etc., etc. And just tell people, inform that this is what you're going to do. Because what happens is that now you're inviting them to provide feedback, and now that can start a dialogue between you and the others in the room. And that takes a little bit of guts to just basically put yourself out there and say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, in a very open, non-threatening way. But it is the best way for you to align with other people to achieve that, as I said, McDonald's level system. So what I want you to take away from this is that yes, you should absolutely collaborate with your other team members if you are working in a distributed team or something like that, because as I said, the end result will suffer if you don't understand that if you have the best solution and you're the only team or the only person in that ecosystem that has a good solution and everybody else sort of not, well, this company is going to suffer, this product is not going to be good, and a lot of issues are going to spring up from the fact that you can't create a consistent workflow or application structure or architecture across your system. And that is very, very bad. So try to achieve the McDonald's experience. Doesn't matter which system you're on, doesn't matter who is working on what, because the code is sort of the same level of quality, the network of systems are sort of working the same way. It's very, very consistent. That is what you're going for in a distributed system. And the best way to achieve that goal is to just, put on your big boy clothes or big girl clothes, I don't know, whatever you wear when you want to do something that is a little bit scary, and just go and say, hey guys, I'm thinking I'm going to do this thing for my next project or the thing I'm working on. How do you think about that? Would you do it in a different way? And then just put yourself out there and see, because most people will be very nice and they will just say, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, or no, maybe you should do that. And now you have a dialogue going, and all of a sudden you're aligning on how to do things, and maybe that can even go into a standard or something that you can all agree on. Yeah, that's actually really cool. Let's make that a rule that we always do that thing. Have a great day.